You know, you could spend an immense expanse of your time meticulously constructing this brilliant strategy to completely revolutionize your life.
Right.
Like you could map out the perfect business plan or design the ultimate health regimen or even, outline a clear path to mastering a really complex new skill.
Absolutely.
But, and here's a catch, if your physical living space is just a chaotic mess, or if you consistently ignore simple messages from the people close to you.
Yeah, those little things.
Exactly. Or if you simply cannot resist the urge to constantly distract yourself with glowing screens, the universe is going to actively sabotage those grand ambitions.
It will completely derail them.
So today we are exploring a profoundly uncomfortable reality. The external world, it really does not care about your magnificent visions. It only cares about the relentless internal accounting of your own psychology.
That is the harsh truth of it, yeah.
We are going to examine why reality seems to resist our desires and, well, how we can restructure our internal governance to actually force the external world to yield. So to start us off, why is this such a blind spot for people?
Well, I mean, it is a critical realization because we spend a tremendous amount of energy fighting the symptoms of our lives, right? Rather than the root cause.
Right, fighting the symptoms.
Yeah, we battle the external obstacles, completely unaware that those obstacles are, well, they're simply the physical manifestations of our own internal fractures.
Wow, internal fractures.
Exactly. To truly command the reality around us, we have to look inward with a level of brutal honesty that, frankly, most people actively avoid. It is just too uncomfortable.
Yes, yeah. I think everyone listening right now can relate to that tension, that friction between what we envision and what we actually, do.
Oh, universally.
Picture this scenario because it is so universal. You have this incredible, radiant vision for your life. You can see it perfectly in your mind's eye.
You can taste it.
Right. A life filled with harmonious relationships, immense personal growth, undeniable professional success, a really profound sense of purpose.
The whole package.
The whole package. You know exactly what that reality looks like. And yet, despite holding that spectacular vision, you look at the landscape of your actual daily life and you find yourself trapped.
Trapped in the mundane.
Yeah, trapped in this endless tide of trivial distractions.
Yeah.
You find yourself actively avoiding the very tasks that are necessary to build that reality, and you just feel this profound, suffocating sense of stagnation.
It is agonizing. It is this agonizing friction between unseen potential and absolute physical paralysis.
Paralysis is a perfect word for it.
Yeah, and it is a painful reality for an overwhelming majority of people. We hold an entire cosmos of potential in our minds, right? But our physical feet, they just feel encased in heavy concrete.
Like you literally cannot move.
Exactly. We know what to do, yet we just watch ourselves doing the exact opposite. It is maddening.
It is. And I think the natural question that arises from that paralysis is, well, why? Why does it feel like the external world is actively resisting our desires?
That is the core question.
Like, you have the ambition, but there is this invisible, unyielding wall between what you desperately want to achieve and the tiny, mundane actions you actually manage to take. On my worst days, honestly, it feels as though the universe itself is mocking those ambitions.
I think a lot of people feel that mockery.
It feels like a cruel setup.
Yeah.
You are allowed to see the absolute peak of the mountain, but every time you try to take a single step forward, the ground beneath you just, turns to mud.
Right, but the problem lies in the assumption embedded within that frustration.
What assumption?
The assumption that the world is something happening to you, like it is a separate external entity that can independently choose to resist or support your desires.
Oh, I see. As if the universe has a vendetta against you personally.
Exactly. But the foundational principle we are unpacking in our conversation today completely shatters that illusion. You cannot master the vast expanse of external reality until you have completely mastered the inner realm.
So the inner precedes the outer.
Always. The universe operates as a flawless mirror. How you govern yourself internally is precisely, without exception, how the universe will govern you externally.
Okay, wait, let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
Because the idea that the universe is a flawless mirror reflecting our internal state, that has a very dark edge to it if people misunderstand it.
It can, yes. We need to be careful here.
Right, because if a tragedy strikes that is entirely outside of my control, say, A sudden economic collapse that destroys a life's work, or an unprovoked betrayal, or some unforeseen illness. Are you saying my internal state caused that?
No, not at all.
Because telling someone they somehow projected a devastating crisis borders on a very toxic kind of victim-blaming.
I am absolutely not saying that, and it is vital we clarify this immediately. This is perhaps the most dangerous misinterpretation of this entire principle.
Good, because that is a major trap.
It is. Look, the mirror of reality does not spawn every chaotic variable of a vast, complex existence. The universe is a system of immense overlapping forces, right? And a massive portion of those forces are entirely outside your individual control.
Right, the macro events.
Exactly. The mirror does not dictate whether an external storm occurs. What the mirror does dictate is the shape, the resonance, and the ultimate outcome of your encounter with that storm.
Okay, unpack that for me. How does the mirror dictate the outcome if it doesn't cause the storm itself?
Think of it in terms of psychological and physical resilience. Let's say your internal state is one of absolute chaos, self-doubt, and fragility.
Yeah, a weak foundation.
Right. Now, a sudden external hardship hits you. Because of that internal state, it will shatter you completely. The universe will mirror your internal fragility by presenting the hardship as this insurmountable catastrophe.
So you experience it as total destruction.
Exactly. You will perceive every single element of the crisis as a personal attack. And your environment will reinforce that victimhood because you will act from a place of complete defeat.
You essentially invite more chaos.
Yes. However, if your internal state is anchored in rigorous self-discipline and unshakable authority, that exact same external storm will hit you, and the universe will mirror your internal strength.
So the hardship changes its nature.
It transforms from a catastrophe into a crucible. The obstacles literally become leverage. You will navigate the chaos with clarity, and the external world will bend to your disciplined response. The mirror does not control the weather, but it absolutely dictates whether you drown in the rain or use it to grow.
Wow. That distinction changes everything, doesn't it? We are not responsible for every random external event, but we are absolutely responsible for the internal architecture that received those events.
Precisely. That is where your sovereign power lies.
And you are saying this brings us to a larger law, the principle of magnification. So the universe isn't just a passive environment. It is an active amplifier of our internal architecture.
It is a relentless amplifier. The external world simply takes your internal state, your self-concept, the psychological frequency you operate at, your silent expectations, and it projects it outward on a grand, sweeping scale.
Like a projector in a movie theater.
Yes, but more interactive. Imagine your internal state as a solitary spark of light and sound. The universe is an endless expanse of highly sensitive acoustic panels and reflective mirrors. Whatever you emit internally, no matter how quiet or hidden it is, it hits those panels and booms back at you with a magnitude that physically shapes your reality.
Let me ground this in a practical example just to make sure the mechanics are crystal clear for everyone listening.
Sure, go ahead.
Say my internal state is one of constant, quiet self-criticism. Like if I'm relentlessly hard on myself for every minor mistake, constantly telling myself I'm inadequate in the absolute privacy of my own thoughts.
A very common state, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what happens then? How does the universe magnify that private insecurity?
The mechanism there is both psychological and structural. Psychologically, your brain's filtering systems will begin to actively seek out validation for that internal belief.
Confirmation bias.
Exactly. You will misinterpret completely neutral comments from colleagues as vicious attacks. You will view constructive feedback as undeniable confirmation of your profound inadequacy.
So you filter reality to match the self-hatred.
Yes, but it goes beyond just perception. Structurally, the universe will mirror this by presenting endless obstacles that feel remarkably like external criticism. Because you project insecurity, people will intuitively trust you less, right?
Right. They pick up on that frequency.
They absolutely do. This leads to lost opportunities. You will encounter situations, individuals, and delays that perfectly mimic your internal hostility. You are essentially building a prison out of your own self-concept, and the external world is just happily supplying the bricks.
It is a terrifying realization when you put it like that. If I secretly hold the belief that I am not capable, the universe magnifies that doubt and hands me a physical situation that proves it.
It echoes your own internal dialogue back to you in 3D.
Right. It gives me an impossible hurdle. And this brings us to a really critical tension in modern culture. Because if the universe is just magnifying our internal state, then the act of creating our desired reality requires immense rigorous action to align that
The
state.
mass action, it is not passive.
But we live in an era that promotes a very different idea, don't we?
You are referring to the modern interpretation of manifestation.
I am, yeah. There is this pervasive narrative out there that suggests a kind of passive escapism. It implies that we can simply sit back, think pleasant thoughts, maintain a positive attitude, and just wait for a magnificent bounty to arrive on our doorstep.
It is a very seductive lie.
It really is.
Yeah.
It sells the idea that effort, struggle, and discipline are somehow contrary to the natural flow of existence. How does that philosophy interact with this concept of the universe as a relentless mirror?
It entirely contradicts it. That modern interpretation of passive escapism is a profound, paralyzing illusion.
Paralyzing, yeah.
Look, existence operates across distinct interconnected planes. You have the mental plane of thought, the spiritual plane of energy, and the physical plane of matter.
Okay, the three planes.
Right. Now, you can align your thoughts perfectly on the mental plane, and you can cultivate profound peace on the spiritual plane, but physical action is the non-negotiable bridge between the unseen and the seen.
The bridge. So you cannot just stand on one side of a rushing river, visualizing yourself on the opposite bank, and expect reality to simply teleport you across.
You cannot. Believing that you do not have to put in effort, that you can somehow bypass the physical plane entirely, is merely a self-imposed boundary. It is born of a desire to escape responsibility.
We just don't want to do the hard work.
Exactly. Action is unavoidable because the very act of creation is the disciplining of external reality. And disciplining the grand, chaotic forces of the external world requires immense internal discipline.
You have to hold the line.
You must have the stamina to hold your desired internal state steady while taking the grueling physical steps to anchor it in this world. Manifestation without rigorous physical discipline is just delusion.
Okay, let's look closely at this internal discipline. Because when I think about my own mind and trying to force it to do the difficult things I know I need to do, like, say, waking up before dawn to work on a project or having a highly uncomfortable conversation with someone, it doesn't feel like I'm managing a serene, rational system.
No, it really does.
It feels like there is a wild, untamed creature living within my psyche. It is this primal, restless force.
A beast.
Yes, it craves constant stimulation. It wants the sugary snack. It wants to scroll through endless streams of digital noise. It wants the immediate dopamine hit. It absolutely despises the idea of doing difficult, long-term work.
That is a brilliant and accurate way to view it. That wild creature is the primal mind. Throughout the passage of eras, various philosophical and psychological traditions have given it different names.
Like the ego.
The ego, the lower self, the primal brain, the reactive mind, whatever you call it, it is the primitive aspect of your consciousness designed entirely for immediate survival.
So it's not evil, it's just basic.
Right. It seeks instant gratification and avoids discomfort at all costs. It does not understand long-term goals. It does not care about your legacy or your grand vision. It only cares about feeling good in this exact passing moment.
So if the universe is a mirror of my internal state, and my internal state is currently being driven by this chaotic, restless creature that just wants to consume junk food and avoid hard work, then the universe is going to manifest a reality that is equally chaotic.
Undeniable.
A reality that is unfocused and entirely lacking in any real substance or lasting achievement.
That is the relentless logic of reality. To govern the cosmos around you, you must first tame this restless inner creature. You have to establish absolute authority over it.
You have to be the boss of your own brain.
You have to prove to your own nervous system that your conscious higher self is the master of the house, not the wild animal running loose in the living room.
I love that analogy. The animal in the living room.
And understanding this leads us to one of the most vital and frequently misunderstood mechanics of the human mind, the absolute myth of compartmentalization.
The illusion of compartmentalization. This is something that trips up an enormous portion of the population, myself completely included.
We all do it to some extent.
We love to put our lives into neat little boxes. We say, my professional life is over here in this highly organized box, and my personal habits are over there in that messy box, and my physical health is in this completely separate box.
We desperately want to believe that the walls of those boxes are thick and impenetrable.
We really do.
We want to believe that we can be highly disciplined and authoritative in our career, projecting competence and power, while simultaneously allowing our personal spaces and our daily routines to descend into absolute chaos behind closed doors.
Like, I'm a CEO at work, but a slob at home, and that's fine.
Right. But the stark, unforgiving reality is this. Nothing in the mind is truly compartmentalized. How you do one solitary thing is how you do absolutely everything.
Let's put a very practical lens on this, because I think people struggle to see the connection between their minor habits and their major goals.
Let's do it.
Let's say I have a grand ambition. I want to build a thriving, innovative enterprise. So I pour intense focus into my business strategies, I read the heavy literature, I analyze the markets, I do the deep work during business hours.
Okay, the professional box looks solid.
Exactly. But outside of those specific working hours, I consistently neglect the mundane details of my existence. I arrive late to casual meetings with friends. I ignore text messages for days. I leave my living space in a state of perpetual chaos.
The personal box is a mess.
Right. Are you telling me that my messy bedroom and my ignored text messages are actively sabotaging my grand business ambition? Like, does the universe really care about my laundry?
They are completely undermining it, and we can explain the exact mechanics of why this happens. It is not about the laundry itself. It all comes down to cognitive dissonance and the overarching frequency of your authority.
The frequency of authority. Okay, explain that.
Imagine your mind as a colossal, highly complex software program running an enterprise. If there is a corrupted string of code in a background maintenance script, like the habit of ignoring your physical space, it doesn't just stay isolated in the background.
It spreads.
It causes memory leaks. It destabilizes the entire system.
Right.
Eventually, the front-end user interface, which is your career, your grand ambitions, will inevitably crash.
Because the brain knows you're a hypocrite.
Exactly. Your subconscious mind is watching you constantly. When you exhibit complete lack of discipline in minor, seemingly irrelevant areas of your life, you are continually broadcasting a signal of unreliability and disorder to your own psyche.
So you're basically practicing being undisciplined.
Yes, the universe does not distinguish between your grand business goals and your daily habits. It does not look at your messy room and say, oh, well, that's just their personal life. I'll ignore that and focus on their professional discipline.
It doesn't compartmentalize for you.
No, it only reads the total output.
The universe doesn't see the boxes. It only feels the entire weight of the system.
The universe responds to your overall level of inner authority. If you cannot govern the simple, basic act of maintaining a clean living space, or the basic courtesy of arriving on time, you are continuously demonstrating an inability to command your immediate reality.
You're failing the small test.
Right. That leakage of discipline negatively alters your entire operational baseline. You are fundamentally telling the fabric of reality, I cannot command my immediate surroundings.
And if you can't command a bedroom?
Exactly. It makes it metaphysically and practically impossible for the universe to entrust you with command over grander, more complex realities like a massive enterprise. The water of chaos floods the entire vessel. The lack of discipline in one arena bleeds directly into the others, rotting the very foundation of your grand ambitions.
Man, this makes me think about the various tools and, shortcuts people try to use to bypass this necessary, grueling discipline.
No, the industry of shortcuts is massive.
It is. People use physical totems to feel aligned, holding beautiful resonant stones, wearing highly specific garments, setting up elaborate aesthetic spaces with perfect lighting and curated objects.
The aesthetic of success.
Yeah, they use these external objects to try and artificially inflate their sense of authority or their psychological frequency. Do these things have any inherent power to alter reality? Like, can my perfectly curated aesthetic workspace compensate for my internal chaos?
This raises a vital point about the profound difference between a tool and a source. Those physical totems hold absolutely no inherent power to change reality on their own.
None at all.
None. They're inert matter. They possess a certain baseline physical vibration, as all matter does, but they cannot do the heavy lifting of self-mastery for you. A beautiful stone cannot clean your messy room.
Right.
A perfectly tailored suit cannot execute the difficult conversation you are avoiding.
They're just props on a stage where no actors have arrived.
Precisely. What they can do is act as an amplifier, but they only amplify the conviction you pour into them. Think of them like a magnifying glass.
Okay, a magnifying glass.
A magnifying glass can start a fire, but only if it is catching the intense rays of the sun. If you have established immense inner authority, which is the sun, a physical totem or a beautiful environment can serve as a focal point to direct and concentrate that authority.
So they work, but only if you already have the power.
Yes. Without that pre-existing internal discipline, without the true blazing source of inner power, the magnifying glass is just a cold piece of glass in the dark. Relying on the external to fix the internal is completely backwards. The mirror cannot change the reflection. The object casting the reflection must undergo the transformation.
Okay, so if we strip away all the totems, all the aesthetic shortcuts, and we accept the hard truth that we cannot compartmentalize our messy habits from our grand ambitions, what is the actual tangible currency we are working with here?
The metric of authority.
Yeah, how do we measure this inner authority? If the universe is keeping score, what exactly is the metric?
We measure it through a profoundly important internal mechanism that functions as your self-trust reservoir.
The self-trust reservoir.
This is the internal wellspring of power that directly dictates your ability to command reality. It is the absolute most vital asset you possess, far more valuable than capital, connections, or raw talent.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of this tank. If this reservoir is the currency that buys reality, how do we earn it? How do we actually fill it?
It is filled through a brutally simple dual mechanism. The reservoir fills when you execute the actions you consciously know you must do, and when you fiercely abstain from the actions you consciously know you must not do.
It sounds elementary, like just do what you're supposed to do, but it is agonizingly difficult in practice.
It is the hardest work a human can do.
Doing the things you know you must do. Waking up at the exact appointed hour when your body is begging for sleep. Having the difficult, confrontational conversation instead of sending a passive-aggressive email.
Sitting down to do the deep, focused work when the wild creature in your mind is screaming for the distraction of social media.
Right. So every single time you push through that intense psychological resistance and execute the necessary action, what is happening biologically and metaphysically?
Biologically, you are reinforcing neural pathways of resilience. You are literally teaching your brain that your conscious will overrides your primal impulses.
You are rewiring the hardware.
Yes. Metaphysically, you are depositing a heavy drop of undeniable power into that reservoir. You are building an unshakable track record with yourself. And equally critical is the other side of the mechanism.
The abstention.
Yes, fiercely abstaining from the things you know you must not do.
The power of the no.
The immense power of the denied impulse. Refusing to engage in the petty gossip that lowers your operational baseline. Refusing the immediate gratification of the junk food that derails your long-term health.
Refusing the urge to just quit when the work becomes tedious.
Exactly. Every single temptation denied is a massive influx of self-trust. You are proving to yourself, repeatedly and undeniably, that you are the absolute master of your vessel.
But the flip side of this equation is where the true tragedy of human potential lies, doesn't it? The tragedy of minor self-betrayals.
That is where most people lose the battle.
Because every time you engage in an action you deeply know contradicts your higher path, the reservoir drains. And the insidious part is that it's rarely a massive, catastrophic failure that ruins us.
Almost never.
It is the microscopic concessions, the death by 1,000 cuts. Like you set an alarm for the dawn of the day with a firm, conscious promise to yourself to begin working on your ambition. The alarm sounds, you feel the tiredness, the wild preacher begs for comfort, and you hit the snooze button. In that split second, a profound transaction occurs, doesn't it?
A devastating, invisible transaction. Your mind keeps an impartial, relentless ledger. When you hit that snooze button, you have just communicated a terrifying message to your deepest self.
What's the message?
You have stated through physical action, my word means absolutely nothing. My promises to myself are void the very moment I experience even mild physical discomfort.
No, my word means nothing.
The mind records that failure. The reservoir drains. And because your self-trust is depleted, your baseline of authority drops. The universe notes this drop in frequency, and your external reality instantly becomes just a little bit more resistant, a little bit more chaotic, and a little bit more indifferent to your desires.
It is a relentless internal accounting. Every skipped workout you promised to do, every ignored responsibility, every time you let someone cross a boundary you swore you would uphold.
It all drains the tank.
Your subconscious mind is watching, and it knows you are bluffing when you later try to command the universe to give you success. I mean, how can the universe trust you with a grand, complex enterprise if your own mind knows you cannot even be trusted to get your physical body out of bed when you declared you would?
That is the inescapable logic. You cannot build a castle on a foundation of broken promises. But I want to make a crucial distinction here regarding what actually drains the tank and what fills it.
Okay, what's the distinction?
Because this often gets confused with societal judgment. This dynamic isn't about subscribing to some universal dogma or a rigid set of external rules about right and wrong. The self-trust reservoir operates on entirely subjective morality.
Subjective morality. Explain that. Because if the mind keeps a relentless score, what rule book is it using to judge a penalty?
It is using the precise rulebook you have consciously or subconsciously authored for yourself. The universe does not judge the action itself, it judges the integrity of your word regarding the action.
Oh, that is fascinating.
For one person, partaking in a certain indulgence, perhaps enjoying a decadent meal or spending an entire day completely disconnected from work just watching movies, might hold absolutely no negative weight.
Because they planned for it.
Because it aligns with their internal harmony, it doesn't violate any personal laws they have established. For another person, that exact same action might represent a profound, agonizing failure of their personal discipline, completely draining their reservoir because they had made a sacred, internal vow to abstain from it to reach a specific goal.
So it's all about integrity to your own declared standards.
Precisely.
If I have decided that answering all client communications within a single day is a core pillar of my professional identity, and I ignore an email for a week because I'm just feeling lazy, my reservoir drains rapidly because I betrayed my own standards.
Exactly.
But if another person genuinely operates on a looser timeline, communicates that clearly, and hasn't made that internal vow of rapid response, their reservoir remains completely intact because they haven't committed to self-betrayal. You are the sole architect of the laws that govern your reality.
The universe does not care about the delayed email itself. It only cares about the internal breach of self-trust that the delayed email represents. The universe measures the structural integrity of your internal foundation.
That is such a liberating way to look at it, but also terrifying because there's nowhere to hide.
There is nowhere to hide from yourself. When your internal laws are consistently upheld without exception, the reservoir fills to the absolute brim. And when that self-trust reservoir reaches its peak capacity, a profound psychological and metaphysical metamorphosis occurs.
What kind of metamorphosis?
The energy within the reservoir alchemizes into something far heavier, far more potent than mere hope or belief. It alchemizes into conviction.
Conviction. Now, this is a word that gets thrown around constantly in motivational spaces, and it's often used interchangeably with the word belief. But I sense we're drawing a hard, definitive line between the two here.
A very hard line.
We are taught constantly that belief is everything, that if you just believe hard enough, you can achieve anything. But you were suggesting that relying on belief is actually a position of profound weakness.
It is a radical paradigm shift, but a mathematically necessary one if you want to understand how reality is shaped. Belief will never be enough to alter the fabric of reality. Never. Examine the very nature of the word. You believe in something precisely because you do not have definitive physical proof of it. Therefore, wherever there is belief, there is inherently a fractional space left wide open for doubt.
Oh.
Belief is an admission that the opposite outcome is still entirely possible.
Let me process that for a second. Belief leaves the door cracked open for doubt. If I stand in front of a mirror and say, I believe I will build a successful company, a tiny, quiet, rational voice in the back of my mind can still whisper, but what if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough?
And the universe hears that whisper.
Right. And because the universe is a flawless amplifier, it reflects both the conscious belief and that tiny, toxic whisper of subconscious doubt, resulting in a mixed, unstable, chaotic reality.
Exactly. Belief is inherently unstable. It requires constant emotional maintenance. You have to keep pumping yourself up. But conviction is absolute, unyielding knowing.
It is permanent.
It is the total eradication of doubt. It is the undeniable physical and spiritual certainty that a thing is so. You do not wake up and tell yourself, I believe I have hands.
No, you don't.
You do not write affirmations about your hands. You know you have hands. You operate from a baseline assumption that your hands exist and will do what you command. When your self-trust reservoir is completely full because you have an unbroken historical track record of keeping your word to yourself, your desires transition from fragile, hopeful beliefs into unbreakable convictions.
I want to use an analogy here to highlight just how critical this distinction between belief and conviction is when we talk about interacting with reality.
Please do.
Let's think of this communication with the universe like a high-stakes negotiation. Imagine two diplomats trying to forge a complex, life-altering treaty that will define the future of their nations.
Okay, high stakes.
But they are speaking completely unrelated languages. One speaks an ancient dialect from a desert region, the other speaks a complex maritime language from an isolated island. They have no translator, no common ground whatsoever.
It is a recipe for absolute chaos, misunderstanding, and ultimate failure.
Exactly. And without conviction, your internal state is doing exactly this. It is constantly miscommunicating with the fabric of reality.
Yeah.
You are consciously saying the words, I want success, I want abundance, I want peace. But because your self-trust reservoir is low, your underlying frequency is projecting the energy of a victim.
You are projecting doubt.
Right. You project the energy of someone who lacks discipline, who expects failure, and who constantly breaks their own promises. You're sending two violently conflicting languages at the exact same time. The universe cannot interpret this chaotic, static-filled signal. It gives you back a garbled, confusing, resistant reality.
That is a phenomenal way to illustrate the mechanism of failure. The universe is receiving contradictory commands, and so it stalls. Conviction purifies the signal.
It acts as the translator.
It does. When you operate from a place of deep conviction earned through relentless self-discipline, your conscious desire and your subconscious frequency are speaking the exact same language in perfect, unified resonance. There is no static, there is no background noise of doubt.
You are clear.
You are no longer asking reality to change, you are declaring that it has already changed. Conviction turns your internal word into universal law.
So if conviction is the ultimate superpower, the purified signal that effortlessly commands reality, then what exactly is happening when we find ourselves completely unable to take action? What happens when the signal drops entirely?
You experience stagnation.
Yes, and I want to transition into the universal struggle of procrastination here. Because we have all been there, and it's not just a casual delay, it is an agonizing physical experience.
Truly agonizing.
You are sitting at your desk, staring blankly at a spreadsheet or a blank page that you know will advance your life, and you feel physically unable to move your hands. An endless tide of time slips away, and the guilt compounds with every passing second, creating this sickening feeling in your stomach.
It is arguably one of the most painful states of modern human existence. And traditionally, we view it through a highly judgmental lens, don't we?
We beat ourselves up endlessly.
We label it as a moral failing. We call ourselves lazy, undisciplined, apathetic, or defective. But if we analyze this from the perspective of mastering reality, we need to discard the moral judgment and apply a profound structural definition to this experience.
Okay, what is the structural definition?
Procrastination is not a character flaw. It is a thermodynamic issue. It is the severe stagnation of energy.
You called it a thermodynamic issue. But thermodynamics is a principle of physics concerning heat and energy transfer. How does that apply to staring blankly at a computer screen?
Think of the fundamental law of energy. It cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. When you possess a grand ambition, you hold a massive reservoir of potential energy.
Right.
But to transform that potential energy into kinetic energy, which is actual physical momentum and results, you need a highly conductive medium. Your identity, your internal state of consciousness, is that medium.
Okay, I am following.
The energy stagnates because it has run into an impenetrable wall. That wall is created when the physical action you are attempting to take is in direct, violent contradiction to your current state of consciousness. Your identity is acting as an insulator, blocking the flow of energy entirely.
An identity clash. Let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly with a very common scenario. Let's say the action I desperately need to take is going to the gym. The physical action is simply lifting weights and sweating.
Simple enough on paper.
But my internal state of consciousness, my deeply held subconscious identity, is that I'm an unfit, lethargic person who absolutely despises physical exertion.
Precisely. You are identifying internally as someone who lacks discipline. Therefore, taking a highly disciplined action like going to the gym creates a violent metaphysical and psychological clash.
It's like oil and water.
Worse, it is trying to force high-frequency energy through a low-frequency conduit that is fundamentally incompatible with it. The energy refuses to flow. It feels like slamming your physical body into a solid brick wall. The friction of that clash manifests as anxiety, exhaustion, and paralysis. You cannot outrun your frequency.
You cannot outrun your frequency. That is a profound statement. If my frequency is broadcasting the undeniable message, I am unmotivated, no amount of sheer white-knuckled willpower is going to make the action of running 3 miles feel natural or easy.
Willpower is not the answer here.
The willpower will eventually snap, right?
Right.
Because the underlying identity hasn't shifted.
Willpower is a finite, exhausting resource used to fight your own frequency. It is a losing battle. The universe is looking at your state of consciousness, magnifying your identity as an unfit person, and ensuring that the physical reality of the gym feels entirely alien, hostile, and impossibly heavy to you.
This brings me to a massive pushback.
Go ahead.
Because if we can't force the action through willpower, how do we break the stagnation? You say, I have to inhabit the identity of the master before taking action.
Yeah.
But how?
It is the ultimate puzzle.
If I have spent a massive span of time consistently failing to build a business or failing to get in shape, and I try to sit down and just adopt the identity of a successful entrepreneur or an athlete, my brain knows I am lying.
Yeah.
I can feel the cognitive dissonance. How do I genuinely convince my brain I am a master when I know I've skipped the work for a month? How do I bypass my own brain's internal lie detector?
This is the crux of the entire journey. You do not bypass the brain's lie detector, you satisfy it. It is not a paradox if you understand the precise sequence of creation. You do not leap across the chasm from failure to master in a single thought. You build the bridge through undeniable microscopic proof.
Microscopic proof.
You must first mentally adopt the state of the master, yes, but you anchor that state not by lying to yourself about your grand achievements, but by executing a microscopic action with the attitude of the master.
Give me the granular mechanics of that. Give me an example.
You do not say, I am a millionaire mogul when your bank account is empty. Your brain will reject it. You say, I am a disciplined creator who dictates their immediate reality.
Okay, that is believable.
And then you prove it by cleaning your desk with absolute militant precision. You prove it by sitting perfectly still for 5 minutes without looking at your phone. You align the frequency to match a highly localized, undeniable action. When your state of consciousness shifts to, I am the authority in this room, the wall vanishes, the energetic stagnation dissolves.
So before I even attempt the massive, intimidating task, I genuinely anchor myself in the identity of someone who has absolute control over their immediate environment. I adopt the internal posture, the self-concept, of someone who finds discipline natural. I align the internal mirror first through a small, undeniable victory.
Yes. And when you do that, the subsequent physical action, doing the hard work, having the tough conversation, is no longer a massive struggle requiring infinite willpower. It becomes a natural, frictionless birthing process of that internal state into the physical world. The action simply flows out of the newly established identity.
This changes the entire approach to daily tasks. Instead of spending hours psyching ourselves up to do the hard thing, burning through our willpower just to start, we should be spending our energy inhabiting the identity of the person to whom the hard thing is just second nature.
Exactly. Shift the identity and the action follows.
But how do we train ourselves to do this consistently? How do we cultivate this immense inner authority so that we can shift our identities at will, regardless of the circumstances? Because that primal creature we talked about earlier, it doesn't want to inhabit the identity of the master. It wants the easy dopamine. It wants to stay comfortable.
This is where we transition from philosophical theory to rigorous daily practice. Cultivating this authority requires actively training the primal self, primarily through the arduous path of delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification. The thing nobody wants to do.
Exactly. We must establish universal, non-negotiable methods for asserting dominance over our own impulses. And the first, most foundational method, which is available to everyone at any moment, is the practice of pure stillness.
Pure stillness.
Yeah.
Just sitting there. It sounds so passive, almost entirely unproductive in a world that glorifies constant motion, but I know from experience it is anything but passive.
It is the furthest thing from passive. It is an act of violent, deliberate rebellion against the primal mind.
Violent rebellion. I like that.
When you commit to a sustained period of absolute silence and physical stillness, the primal mind will immediately begin to panic. It is accustomed to constant input, constant movement, constant distraction. When you remove that input, it feels like psychological starvation.
It literally thinks it's dying.
It will demand stimulation with alarming intensity. It will generate physical twitches, phantom itches, sudden muscle aches, and an overwhelming barrage of chaotic mental noise, urging you to get up, check a device, send a message, do absolutely anything other than remain still.
It throws a massive tantrum. It is like a toddler being told they cannot have a toy. I've tried to sit in perfect stillness, and suddenly my brain remembers an obscure email I forgot to send 5 years ago, and it convinces me that it is a life-or-death emergency that must be addressed that very second.
It is incredibly persuasive.
It is. The physical urge to move is almost painful. Think about the device you're listening to this on right now. If you pause and try to sit still for just 2 minutes, your hand will physically ache to reach for that screen.
Exactly. And remaining perfectly still in the face of that overwhelming mental and physical tantrum is the ultimate declaration of authority. By refusing to move, you are looking the primal mind directly in the eye and stating, I am the authority. Your panic does not dictate my physical reality. Your craving is not a command.
You are reestablishing the hierarchy.
Every single second you remain still when your body screams to move is a massive, undeniable deposit into the self-trust reservoir. You are rewriting the hierarchy of your nervous system.
This leads perfectly into another vital concept we need to explore regarding training the primal self fasting from sensation. And I don't just mean the dietary kind, although abstaining from food is a powerful part of it. I'm talking about intentionally depriving the ego of pleasure for the completion of a natural cycle.
Fasting in all its forms is a profound tool for self-mastery. It is the conscious, deliberate choice to experience lack.
Which we hate.
Modern society is entirely structured around immediately satiating any desire that arises. We are conditioned to be completely intolerant of lack. Hungry? Eat immediately. Bored? Look at a glowing screen instantly. Lonely. Engage in empty, superficial socialization. We have lost the ability to tolerate an unmet urge.
We never allow ourselves to sit in the discomfort of an unmet desire. We rush to plug every psychological hole with consumption. But by choosing to abstain, whether that is committing to a complete rotation of the earth without consuming food, or locking away digital screens for an entire weekend, or refusing to fill the quiet air with meaningless chatter, we are deliberately starring the primal urge for constant gratification.
You are severing the automatic, deeply ingrained link between impulse and action. From a neurological perspective, you are resetting your dopamine baseline. You are teaching your nervous system that a craving is not a mandate. It is merely a suggestion, a passing physiological weather pattern, and you, the master, have the absolute power to observe it and decline it.
Let's expand on that idea of not filling the air with meaningless chatter. You mentioned the power of silence. I feel like in our current era, the pressure to constantly broadcast our thoughts, our opinions, our daily activities is immense. Everyone is a broadcaster.
It stems from a deeply ingrained infantile desire. From the moment we are born, we desperately need to express ourselves to ensure our physical survival. We cry to be fed, we babble to be acknowledged by our caregivers.
Sure, it's survival.
As adults, this survival mechanism often mutates into a desperate, unchecked need to constantly express our opinions, to be perceived, to be validated by the external world. We broadcast our every thought, hoping the universe will echo back confirmation of our importance.
We want everyone to know how smart we are, how funny we are, or how morally right we are about a particular topic. We argue in comment sections, we over-explain ourselves in meetings. It is a massive leakage of energy.
It is an immense, devastating leakage of energy. By choosing periods of absolute intentional silence, refusing to engage in petty debate, refusing to justify your actions to those who do not matter, refusing to broadcast your internal state to the world, you actively deprive the ego of its desperate need for external validation.
You starve the ego.
You force the energy inward. You learn to validate yourself. This fortifies your internal fortress, making you incredibly resilient to the opinions, criticisms, and reactions of others. When you no longer need the world to tell you who you are, the world loses its power over you.
This brings us to a critical distinction that I think ties the entire philosophy of internal governance together. The profound difference between reaction and response. When we live a life dictated by instant gratification, constantly satiating every impulse, constantly broadcasting our opinions, we breed a highly reactive mind.
A reactive mind is a mind completely enslaved by the external world. When you are reactive, the environment dictates your internal state without any friction. You are a leaf blown about by the wind.
Right. Let's look at a daily example. If you are listening to this while driving, and someone suddenly cuts you off in traffic, a relatively minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of things, the reactive mind immediately sees red. It loses all perspective. That external event violently alters your internal frequency. Suddenly, your heart rate spikes, your thoughts become hostile, and your entire day is colored and distorted by that anger. You carry that hostility into your next meeting, you snap at a colleague, you bring the tension home to your family later that evening. The external storm has violently breached your hull and is wreaking absolute havoc on your internal governance.
And because the universe is a relentless mirror, that reactive hostility is magnified and projected back at you, ensuring the rest of your day is filled with increasing friction, conflict, and obstacles. The mirror reflects the chaos you allowed inside.
Spirals.
But delayed gratification, the rigorous daily practices of stillness, fasting and intentional silence, breeds the capacity for response.
How do you define response in this specific context? How is it fundamentally different from reaction?
Response is the sovereign, deliberate act of holding your internal frequency steady, completely regardless of the external storms raging around you. It is the mastery of the pause, the sacred space between the external stimulus and your physical action.
The pause is where the power is.
When the external world presents adversity, the master does not react instantly. The master observes the event, acknowledges the primal mind's desire to panic or lash out, maintains their internal authority, and consciously chooses an action that aligns with their desired reality.
They don't let the outside dictate the inside.
They do not allow the external event to lower their frequency. Instead, they use their stable, unshakable internal frequency to dictate the outcome of the external event.
So instead of the world changing you, you maintain your absolute center, which forces the world to change around you. You absorb the chaos, neutralize it within your internal fortress, and project order back out. That is the ultimate command over reality.
It is the absolute essence of self-mastery. It is the moment the mirror reflects a master and the universe bows.
This has been an incredibly dense, massive journey today. Let's synthesize the core mechanics of everything we've explored. We began with that deeply relatable frustration, the agonizing feeling of an unyielding world, the invisible wall between our grand ambitions and our actual actions, the feeling that the cosmos is actively mocking our desires.
And we discovered that the world is not unyielding. It is merely waiting. It is a flawless, impartial mirror, patiently waiting for our internal governance to become absolute. We learned that mastery over the cosmos, the ability to shape reality to our will, is never granted as a gift or a lucky break. It is fiercely earned.
It is earned through the quiet, unseen promises we keep to ourselves. It is forged in the darkest, most tedious shadows of the day when absolutely no one is watching, when the wild creature of the primal mind is begging for an easy escape, and we consciously choose the heavy discipline of stillness and deliberate action instead.
We must hold on to the realization that compartmentalization is a myth. Every single action, no matter how small, is a broadcast of our frequency. Every minor choice is either depositing power into the self-trust reservoir or draining it away.
There are no neutral actions.
And it is only when that reservoir overflows through relentless discipline that our fragile beliefs alchemize into the unbreakable power of conviction. Once your word becomes absolute law to your own mind, your word becomes absolute law to the very fabric of existence.
The mirror reflects the master. It is a terrifying responsibility because it removes all excuses and all victims, but it is also the most empowering realization possible. It means the keys to the universe are not hidden in some distant, unreachable location. They are buried underneath the mundane daily choices we make every single hour.
The universe is listening intently to the language of your actions, not the fragile whispers of your wishes.
So I want to leave you with a final lingering thought. A question to carry with you into your immediate physical environment long after this conversation ends. We know now that the universe is a flawless mirror, relentlessly magnifying your internal authority outward. If every solitary, unnoticed choice you make, every morning alarm you refuse to snooze, every uncomfortable truth you face, every momentary digital impulse you deny, is a heavy, deliberate brushstroke on the grand canvas of your cosmos. Wait, what kind of world are you secretly painting in the quiet moments when absolutely no one is watching?